Something in the end is the point?
Excuse me?
Is my mic on? Something in the end is the point. That sounds profound.
Something in the end is the point.
Did I get it?
Go outside and dance until your heart sings and the trees sway. Listening is tricky business, isn't it? How many times have you been in an unintended game of telephone, right? Or how many times have you said to a partner or friend, "Are you really listening to me? Did you hear me?" Despite the fact that we do hear the sounds coming from someone else's mouth most of the times, I think it's also fair to say that we probably miss some, if not a great deal, of what is trying to be communicated. Now think back to some of the conversations you had yesterday, for example, or maybe even already this morning. Is it possible that there was more being said than what you heard? Definitely. And on the other side, did you feel that what you were communicating was indeed deeply understood? How many people felt deeply understood so far today? Okay. You're new here. It'll wear off. No, I'm just kidding. In several communication models, including nonviolent communication, which I know many of you are familiar with, there's one step where you are to check for understanding by repeating back what you heard the other person saying and asking, did I get that right? But we rarely do this in conversation, right? Rarely do we check in with the other person to ensure we are hearing them correctly. More likely than not, they are only partway through a sentence before we begin to finish in our own minds the sentence that we think they are going to say, right? We get our responses all queued up and ready to go. And what are the odds that we get it right? Anyone ever have that same argument with someone over and over? Not all of your hands should be up, right? Ever get stuck in a conversation with another person when they're clearly just not getting it? And though we try 1,000 times, we humans long to be heard, so we do keep talking. We long to be heard because we long to be connected. And when we feel heard, we do feel connected, don't we? Even in the most introverted among us have this need for connection. Sometimes I think that it's perhaps the introverted who are just being more discerning about their connection. They don't have a lot of bandwidth for what some call small talk that substitutes so often in our culture for what would be true connection. Social scientist Brene Brown has been studying connection for her entire career, continually asking the question, what keeps us from and what brings us into connection? Now, here's an interesting thing about her studies. After decades of research and study on this topic, Brown makes the bold assertion that listening to others is actually not our greatest challenge when it comes to connection. Despite the telephone game challenge that our communication often is subject to, Brene Brown has concluded that our lack of ability to deeply listen to others is simply a symptom of our inability to deeply listen to ourselves. And she asserts that listening to ourselves is not about hearing all those thoughts that rumble through our minds, but instead that listening to ourselves is all about emotion. I love how she puts it. She says, we cannot be more connected to other people than we are to ourselves. if we don't understand our own emotional landscape, if we don't understand what's driving our own thinking and driving our behavior, we won't be able to understand others. I love that phrase, emotional landscape. Can you picture your own emotional landscape right now? Go ahead and picture it. What does the terrain of your heart look like right now? What are the rocks and the rivers called? Is there heavy fog, clear skies? These emotional landscapes that we live among occupy the vast space between us and the other. And just like the weather impacts our visibility when we drive, so too Brown concludes that these emotional landscapes impact our connection or our disconnection with those around us. There's a term called always already being. It refers to our general emotional state that we bring with us, regardless of the situation, regardless of the location. We bring this with us. Some people call it our personality. Many would say that it is our personality, this always already being, that creates our personal reality. Because indeed, we create a world around us in our own image, do we not? Science even has something to say about this. In 1949, psychologist Donald Hebb laid out his compelling theory called assembly theory. And it's summarized often in the phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together. Has anybody heard of this before? The idea is that the neurons in our brain will use the same neural pathways, the same synaptic connections that they have used in the past to make the same connections to other neurons, unless there's a conscious effort to do so. Basically, our brains are lazy, right? Because it just takes less energy to go down an already formed path than to bushwhack a new one. Right, Nick Joke? So we go down the same paths of thought and emotion over and over again. Have I already asked how many times you've gone through the same argument over and over again, down the same pathway? Now, according to the Hebbian theory, activating a few select neurons is enough to trigger a whole bunch of other neurons. That's how we produce memories. And it also produces habits. Habits of our actions, habits of our thoughts, but also habits of our emotions. That we have emotional habits. So it is possible that when we smell the aroma of a specific herb, it may trigger a memory of a family gathering or maybe a specific person, right? But likewise, when we encounter someone with whom we already have strong feelings about, most likely we will experience them just as we had in the past, whether that be with love or with those not quite as warm and fuzzy feelings, right? And thus our own emotional landscapes get filled up with thoughts and emotions that are generally not new, but which cloud the scenery and our ability to actually listen. Brown research suggests that if we are not aware of the internal chatter and its emotional impact on ourselves, we are less likely to actually be able to hear another. So here we go. I want to apologize for a second. I have allergies and I forgot an allergy pill, so I'm going to walk over there for 1 second. Hold on tight. I want to sniffle. I'm so sorry. What's up with the, what's it called, ragweed? Is that what's happening right now? I'm not from Georgia, but everybody warns me about the Georgia allergies. So sorry. Okay, so here we go. Oh, we got Douglas and Ann standing up there. So, Bruce, you know, I really loved your playing this morning.
All right, be careful. She might want something. Everybody wants something from you. Other people must not like your playing, so she has to pump you up. She doesn't know music. She obviously didn't hear that mistake you made. You're not nearly as good as you pretend to be.
Thanks, Deborah. I really enjoyed your message. It was very impactful.
Oh.
Thanks, Deborah. Your message.
He says that to me.
Oh,
Go ahead. We'll try this again.
You're stepping on my line.
Bruce, do you have something to say to me?
Thanks, Deborah. Your message was really impactful.
He's just being polite. He really doesn't think that. Today, he said this today. This must mean he thinks all the other ones before have been real crap. He was sleeping through most of the message. Don't let him fool you.
Thanks, Bruce. We laugh, but how many times do we do that, right? Someone says something to us, and we have this whole inner dialogue that looks like Douglas or Anne just talking to us in our minds. Thank you for being my inner voice, Anne.
Very accurate.
Good job, Douglas. It can be insightful and a bit scary to take a day and write down what you hear as your underlying messages from others, and notice what you are already always hearing is programmed to pick up. What are you already always ready to hear from others? You're not good enough. You should have done it differently. It's your fault. Shame on you. You're an imposter. All right, the list goes on. Did you know that scientists have shown that by the time we are 35 years old, 95% of who we are is simply memorized behaviors? So 95% of our life is just on autopilot. Now, some days I feel this is more accurate to say I'm on autocorrect. How about you? One of the bad versions, right? You know, when you type, I'll pick up some scones on my way, only to get autocorrected to be, I'll pluck up some scum today. It's hard to communicate in a world when our autocorrect is on already, always hearing mode, right? It's already autocorrecting. Doesn't matter what someone else says. He said my sermon was impactful, but my autocorrect corrected it to something different. I think it is fair to say that we are all guilty of listening under the influence, right? We all listen under the influence of our emotional landscapes. I love how Brene Brown says this. These are her words. She says, make no mistake, emotion is at the wheel. Thinking and acting are not riding shotgun in the front seat. No, thinking and acting are hog-tied and put in the trunk. Emotion drives. Of course, recognizing our own emotional states can be easier said than done. In her research, Brown and her team collected a survey from over 7,000 people in which they were asked to write down a list of every emotion that they could identify that they were feeling. The average length of the list that they received back was 3. Can you guess which 3 emotions? People identified being happy, sad, and mad. Yeah, or angry. Yeah. Oops, where's my tissue? Hold thought. So sorry. Yeah, 3 emotions, happy, sad, and mad. Brown has said that she was shocked by this finding and started to ask the question, what does it mean if we don't have a vocabulary that is as expansive as the human experience? Because at some point, our emotions need to bump up against language. And she suggests that to know our own emotional landscape, we must be able to give language to those emotions. So here we are, emotional beings, whether we want to admit it or not, and eventually all those emotions need to find language. They need to be heard. We need someone to get us. Yes? It feels good when someone gets us. Now, of course, there's no magic pill that will help us locate our emotional landscape and subsequently help us listen more deeply to others and to ourselves. But if neuroscience is correct, and what fires together, wires together, then it seems to me that practice is the best medicine for our divide. Here it comes, Mark Cobb. He was waiting for this. Luckily, as Unitarian Universalist congregations, we offer many ways to practice connection. We offer many ways to do your own inner exploration and many ways to affirm and nurture the connection with others. And one of the key ways we do this is something that we call listening circles. How many people are actually in a listening circle? Quite a few. Listening circles offer the opportunity to practice recognizing and expressing your own inner landscape and practice listening deeply to others. They do this both with the opportunity in a circle of about 8 to 10 people to do a personal check-in, but also as they explore various topics. They take turns sharing what it is they feel about a particular topic and listen deeply to what each other is saying. During our second hour today, we're going to have an opportunity for you to explore our listening circles. So stay tuned. I'll talk a little bit more specifically about them, and then several of our facilitators are going to go in rooms, and if you'd like to explore what one is like, we'll do a little mini version of that. For those watching us online, I believe we'll also have an online circle. Is that right, Mark? Yes, we will have an online circle. Parker Palmer, the Quaker author and educator, wrote this. He says, "The more dividedness we perceive in each other, the less safe and sane we feel. Every day as we interact with family, friends, acquaintances, and strangers, we ask ourselves if what we see is what we get. And all those other people are asking the same about us." Don't you notice that? When you're with somebody, you're kind of like, you can feel whether they're really authentic or whether there's something just a little not. He continues, he says, "Being cautious about the degree of congruence between our appearance and our inner reality is one of our species' most ancient ways of seeking safety in a perilous world." Basically, he's saying we're most safe when we're with other people that know their inner landscapes. To shrink that gap between who we think we are and who we really are, to shrink the gap between who we think the other is and who they really are, these are the gifts of deep listening. Beginning with self, we must be willing to acknowledge who we are. Being with others, we must trust in their journey, that they'll do the same. Parker Palmer, referring to others in his life, once wrote, he says, "I took comfort and strength from those few people who neither fled from me nor tried to save me, but were simply present to me." Right? I took comfort from those who were simply present for me. Their willingness to be present revealed their faith that I had the inner resources to make this treacherous trek, quietly bolstering my faltering faith. There is enough dividedness in our world outside these doors. We know that. And my prayer for all of us in this community is that here, beginning in this space, we are able to create a culture of deep listening, that we are able to build a culture that allows each of us to explore our inner terrain and to be present while others do the same. I think it takes practice. I don't think that path is well worn in the human race. So we're going to have to do some bushwhacking together. And if the research is correct, that is what will help us build more peaceful, loving, and compassionate world that we say that we seek to do. And though it's not listed explicitly as one of our 7 principles, isn't it true that they all could be boiled down to some degree or another till we affirm that we will nurture connection? In recognizing each other's inherent worth and dignity, we are recognizing and nurturing connection. In honoring each other's free search for truth and meaning, we are honoring connection. In working for justice, equity, and peace with compassion, we are connected. And in honoring the interconnected web of existence, we affirm our already existing connection. So may your deep connection bring you connection to yourself, to your own inner landscape. May those be beautiful vistas. And when they are not, may you know that beside you walks many friends willing to be present for you and with you. Amen. Send.